Hi, I'm Rebecca,
And I'm Larissa.
and we're creatives coming alongside you to learn and grow on our journeys to success.
And you know what time it is?
Broke
at the Oscars time.
Okay. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. I was talking to my sister. We were shopping for clothes and we were looking at dresses and my sister was like, oh yeah, if you go to the Oscars, then you could just like, oh, then I could afford to buy these dresses. She's like, no, actually you still couldn't because you'd be broke at the Oscars. And I was like, oh yeah.
That's pretty good. Yeah. Hey, it's catching on. The name is becoming a trend. At least
just wear your jeans to the Oscars.
Honestly,
pajamas. I don't know.
If I ever go to the Oscars, I might.
No.
I might.
No. All right, on that note.
I'm really thinking about it now, but okay, we should probably move on.
No, unrelated to the actual event of going to the Oscars.
Yes, but much more important.
Much more important.
Yes.
We have a guest. Kevin Peeples. He's a famous director. Well, yes.
Yeah,
famous director. And he's here to talk to us today. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us today.
Man, thank you guys for having me. This is a blast.
Yes.
Yeah, we're so excited to have you on here. I know you have much wisdom to share. Would you mind to take just a few minutes and kind of introduce yourself to our audience? Just tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do in film.
Yeah, first I got to say I love the name of this podcast. Just like you guys going to the Oscars was a dream, and as a kid, and just hearing this title, I'm like, that is just like this catchy, amazing title. I've got to be on this show, and
man.
maybe one day we'll all be broke at the Oscars together.
That'd be amazing.
Okay, if we all wear jeans, that yes.
It's a group thing.
Yeah, it's a group thing. Yeah.
Well, thank you for the introduction. I don't know if I'm quite famous, but I am living my dream that I set out to do since I was 9.5 years old.
Wow.
I had a little phase where I was like, maybe I could be one of those trash truck guys who hangs on the back and doesn't have to wear a seatbelt. And my brother quickly reminded me that that's not a profitable career.
But it'd be fun though.
I mean, what kid doesn't want to wear a seatbelt and for your job?
I know, right?
So I had a quick little phase of that, but then just seeing the magic of storytelling and the magic of what a camera can do and bring. Anything is possible when you put a camera in front of people. And that just captured me. And so, been wanting to be a movie director since I was 9.5, and finally living my dream. I've got a film coming out in theaters this fall that we shot last year. Got delayed a little bit with COVID, but it'll be out in theaters.
What's the name of that film?
The name of the film is Lifemark.
Okay,
right, nice.
So it is the next Kendrick Brothers production. They gracefully let me fill the director's chair for them on their next film, and they let Aaron Burns fill the production role for Steven. So
that's awesome.
So they passed on the mantle and got to kind of fill their shoes and work alongside of them. So it was a blast.
Well, we are very excited to. I think we mostly wanted to talk to you about directing today. I know that you are multifaceted and have done several things in production, but we wanted to focus on directing a little bit. So do you want to start us off with some questions?
So we have a whole list of things.
Yes.
But I don't know, as we like to go along the process of like starting in pre-production, as one should always start. A very good place to start. So just kind of jumping right in, and this is a very broad question, but what are some of your first steps in pre-production as a director? And I guess I have a follow-up as far as like being hired on as a director, your first steps maybe versus directing your own projects. There might be, I don't know if there's a difference in what you would do and where you would start. But your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a great question, a great place to start. The way I'll describe it is, you can be there's different types of directors that you can be. And I think when you start out as a kid and you want to be like, hey, I want to direct movies, you think about telling your own stories and directing your own movies. And then, that would be more of kind of like an independent director. Despite whatever distribution you get, if it becomes a studio film through distribution, in my definition, an independent director is one who is, you may or may not be producing, but you kind of have that producer hat in the sense that you are in charge of casting, you're in charge of going out and finding the funding, you're in charge of you hire people and you delegate, but it starts with you at the head, and then you hire producers, you bring on the team, and they may have more power than you in one place or another, but it's an idea that's kind of birthed from you. And then you have studio directors that get hired by producers or by a studio, and you're basically doing a job for them, kind of a work for hire. So another way to look at it is as a studio director is kind of being like a surrogate mother, where instead of having your own baby and then choosing if you want to parent it or adopt it, being a surrogate, it's completely someone else's idea and you're doing it completely for them, and it gets ripped away and it's theirs. So you have your control over it for a short little time, but then when the producers are ultimately in control, they have the say on the edit, they have the say on the casting. They could even fire you. At one point, if you have creative differences, I'm sure you guys have seen directors getting fired for creative differences or leaving the project. Stuff with like Star Wars and Marvel films, you've seen those things, or even in a franchise film, you might have different directors on every film in that series because they're studio directors, similar to television. So I set out to be an independent director and have become more or less like a studio director. I'll be working on a script or a project of mine, and someone will call and say, hey, we've got a funded project and we'd love for you to direct it. Are you interested in this project? And then you either look over what the idea is, and so far a lot of my projects have been based on true life stories. So it's looking at the source material and saying, is this something that I feel qualified and comfortable to tell? Do I feel like I can not let the client down, on delivering their project? But again, it's basically a work for hire. You going into it that I'm making something for them, I'm bringing my skills to it, but at the end of the day, it's their project, it's their film that they get to walk away with. So not something that you, as a kid, set out to be. You don't really think of it in that way, but these last two films that have been theatrical releases for me have been, I've been a studio director on them. So you get a lot of creative power and a lot of decision making, but like on this one, I got first draft of writing the script, and then you hand that off to the executive producers, and then they, knowing their audience, knowing the budget and those kinds of things, they make changes to it, and depending on schedule and time, they may come back and say, what do you think about this? Or they come back and say, hey, here's what it is, you've got to live with it, and then you move on. So through that process and through the mentorship process, you learn a lot about where the creativity meets budget, and that's really kind of a big thing in at least the Christian film world and the low budget movies is, I tend to write a lot of scenes. When you write a story, you want to write the best story possible. You don't want to think about, well, we can't afford for them to go here. But once you get that script, then they say, okay, we've got to cut 10 locations. So you say, okay, well, instead of going outside in the front yard and speaking, they'll have that whole, 2 conversations will be in the house. And then you kind of make those changes to the script, and then you move on. So going back to your question of kind of that starting process, as a studio director, you really say, do I love this material, and can I see this through to the end? Am I going to be giving it my all the way through? And if you don't really feel attached to it or, in love with it, then as exciting as it's going to be, that you're probably going to let them down at some point. And that's, it's better to let them find the right person for the job than for you to get a job to learn or get experience or, things like that.
Yeah, and that's so important too, because even for studio directors, you can often tell as the audience watching a movie whether or not the people making it cared about the movie. You know, you can tell if it's like someone was really passionate about telling the story or this was just a cash grab, you know. And so
Exactly.
yeah, as filmmakers we have to, you know, do things and sometimes sacrifice some creativity in order to have a sustainable career. And so yeah, that's a very difficult balance to strike. So thanks for laying that out for us. That was really good. Could you talk a little bit about how you approach a script specifically that either that, because I imagine when you write it, you're very familiar with the characters, you know, have certain things about the story that you know are like the key things that are very important to you. How do you go about that process when someone else just hands you a script of sort of familiarizing yourself with it and then also finding things in someone else's script that you can grab onto and say, okay, these are really important, this is how I need to approach the script?
Yeah, I mean, so far the films that I've directed, I've been able to write, at least co-write or write the scripts. I haven't yet, as far as the feature film work, I haven't been handed a script and then had to go forward with it. You know, I've had commercials and promotional videos and things where people have written the scripts. You know, on that side, you know, for back when before I did features and I did client work, there was a 10 episode series for a company online. So it was kind of like 10 short films that promoted a product. So it was kind of like a 35-minute feature film, so to speak, in like 10 episodes. And so they hired a writer, and you know, the writer would give you scripts and you'd look over them, and it's kind of the same way that whenever you write a script and the producers say, here's kind of the budget side of things, you know, they hand it to you and you could say, hey, we can do this, or we can even do something greater in the budget you've given us. Here's an idea. And they go back and kind of retweak those scripts. But so far I've been blessed to be handed projects that, you know, that they want to either write or co-write. And so the last two I've been able to co-write with Alex Kendrick. And it's just a fun, you know, team effort where, for example, on the film Like Arrows that we shot in 2017, it went through 50 years of time, and Alex and his brothers had just done a tribute for their parents where they had a 50th anniversary tribute. And so I was like, hey, I don't know what the best thing to say at those scenes are because I've never done that for my parents. You know, I'm a young parent. We've got the kids in diapers running around at home. So I wrote the structure of that scene. You know, people come in here. Here's where they need to enter and exit. Here's the vision we have for the entire moment and the emotional beats. But I would say, you know, Alex, insert dialogue here for what this person needs to say based on the experience you've had. And so I wrote most of the first half of that movie, and then Alex wrote more of the dialogue in the last half as people got older, and then it you know, blended together. And so it's really kind of finding ways to say, you know, I'm not good at everything. I don't have experience here, and being willing to admit that and say, hey, I can write this scene where the baby has a poopy diaper because that just happened in my house yesterday. So I'll write that. But you write this, and you know, make sure and compliment them. Like, nobody can do this better than you. I can't touch this, kind of a thing. And then once they write it, you know, then you can both see different perspectives and say, hey, what if we shorten it? Or what if I take a moment here that I wrote and add that in as kind of a backstory memory into what you wrote, and then, you know, it all works together.
That's so great. And yeah, that's something that I feel like we come back to all the time on this podcast with everyone that we have on is communication and collaboration. And I think that speaks to just your maturity as a director, being able to recognize like, hey, you know, if someone else can do this part and it will be stronger, to be able to delegate and collaborate and all of that. So yeah, that's very important. And that's really cool that you brought that out.
That brings up another thought on kind of when we're comparing studio directors to kind of independent. There's a script that I've been working on for about four or 5 years now, and I think I'm on draft 13. And it's, you know, when you don't have funding, when you don't have anybody attached to it, you've got to fight for it, and you've got to make it as best as you can. And part of the reason it's taken so long is you're working on it and someone calls and says, here's a movie, and you're like, okay, I've got no funding for mine. Yours is completely funded. And you believe in the project, so you take a break for a year or two and do a film. And whenever it's kind of a studio film where the funding's already there, the main cast is already there, you kind of work on a schedule, and it's like, okay, you've got 4 months to work on a script. And whether or not you are completely happy with that script, that's as much time as you have, because they've got their schedule for a certain summer, they've got a release schedule for theaters, and you've got to go with it. And so sometimes you end up tweaking the script more on set or kind of on the day. You know, they go through different colors of your script when you make revisions, and so you've got to keep printing, you know, different pages and adding them in the script. And I think we went through like 6 or 7 different color sets or revisions, you know, because we'd either get there and, you know, like we've already said that dialogue somewhere else in the film, and we just now picked up on it, because you don't have time in those initial 4 months to go over it and go over it and go over it, and you know, that kind of a thing. So it's you just got to say, you know, this is what it is, and we've got to be happy with it, and hopefully that teamwork, like you guys mentioned, somebody will catch it. Sometimes, you know, there was a scene with Kirk where he was going through his lines, and he was like, you know, I don't feel like saying this. And we say, okay, give us one take with it and one take without it, and we've got both, and then you move on. And sometimes when you see him doing it and you're not paying attention to these are my words or whose words are these, but you just look at the monitor and you're like, I got everything out of that scene that I needed. We don't need, you know, the other version, and you move on.
I feel like there's like from what you're saying, I love the idea of like being flexible and just like working with your team and like allowing other people's creative input on the day. But yeah, it does seem like, you know, maybe that's why we find, you know, our classic just like mass produced blockbusters to be a little lackluster in the script writing department. And why like we see so many like beautiful indie films that are just like so solid and so tight. Like I'm thinking of like Lady Bird, like the dialogue and everything, because that was like her baby. Like she worked on that script like to make it so tight, and so like just the indie vibe was just very beautiful and it worked. But
yeah, she had to fight for it.
Maybe she did. I don't know. And you hear about like, of course you hear about like things like Aaron Sorkin, and like of course he makes huge movies, but he fights for his words too. But I don't know, it's like a certain level. I don't know, it's just very interesting.
And I think it takes a special kind of person to do that too, because you know, like you're saying, you know, you're working on your project and you're passionate about this, but you have to sometimes take a break to pay the bills or to do something else. And so to not give up until to keep fighting is sometimes challenging, but can be very rewarding too when you finally get to make that dream project and see it. Yeah, it can be very rewarding.
And that's one of my complaints when you go see a tentpole film, and you know, it's like they've got all the money in the world to make anything happen, and it looks beautiful. The rotoscoping is flawless. You know, everything is solid in the film, but it's just like the story was just there was something missing. And you know, once you kind of understand the system, you know, you realize like they probably had a schedule with, you know, actors built out on when they had everybody available. They know that they're going to release these every 2 years, so there's only so much time, and you know the script is going to get approved and shot, you know, up until the last minute, because they're going to make this film. They know it's going to make money. Like, you know, if you hear the script of Spider-Man's going to be bad, are you not going to go see it? You're probably still going to go see the film. You know, so it's like the movie is going to be what it is, and the script's going to be what it is, and I don't think when they realize that people are going to come and spend the money on the tickets, I don't think they fight as hard for the scripts as like you talked about with the indie films, where, you know, it's really, whether it's theatrically distributed or not, you know, the person had to fight for it to get it made.
Sounds like we need to fix the system. Yeah, I hear little me talking about fighting against the system.
Rage against that machine.
Rage against the dying of the light.
I think one of the best screenwriting advice I heard was just, you know, write the movie that you want to see. You know, if you have all these, you know, kind of complaints and, I wish they would have done this, you know, if you're an aspiring writer or director, start making a list of those things and just say, you know, what would be, you know, if this movie were perfected, what would I perfect about it? And then add all those together and say, this movie, whether it's this fight scene or this love scene or this whatever, scene that you have, what do you want to see in a movie that is what you always complain about? And go and fix it yourself.
Right.
Don't just complain about it, but fix it.
Right.
And, go for it. Don't try to make somebody else's movie. Just make what's the movie that you want to see that you have never seen before.
Yeah.
That's really good.
That is really good.
There's some movies that have content that, I don't feel comfortable watching. And when you realize, like, for that joke or that thing to be in there, how many conversations and how many different people have all approved that one moment for it to end up on the screen. It doesn't just, like, you might have an ad-lib joke that makes it on the fly, that makes it in there, but for some, whether it's nudity or whether it's a joke that's offensive to somebody, like, when you realize how, like, for 5 weeks, it's 10 meetings a day all about the script, it's like, I don't know, that's just a thought that comes to mind. It's just that, like, that's my job as a director in pre-production, is getting familiar with the script. The more familiar I am with the script, because they'll say, hey, in scene, 135, this thing happens here. You've got to be able to, okay, scene 135 is this. What did I mean when I wrote that? And you can't forget those things. And the better you can remember your script, the better director you are. And it's, of course, it's all about the script, but you don't realize, like, how much it's about the script until you're there 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day, and it's all about the script.
Yeah. Wow. Well, and even something that I've found just in the limited, like, bigger projects that I've worked on in smaller capacities, the thing that I found so interesting is that the content of the script really dictates a lot of the content on set, I guess you could say. So in the sense that, like, if I'm working on a film that's rated PG and there's, like, no language in it, for the most part, there's not really going to be that much language on set, in my experience. I'm sure this isn't true for every project, but there's not going to be much language on set, or if there is, it's going to be kind of hushed to the side, kind of a side comment. But if there's a lot of language in the script and we're hearing the F word all day, every day anyway, the crew is going to be using that same language. And I found that to be true in multiple areas, not just language. But yeah, that's something that I think I didn't realize, until relatively recently, is that, even like dirty jokes or something, like, the crew will be having conversations about the script or, referencing the script, or just, I don't know, it just really sets the tone on set more than you think it would.
That's really interesting.
That's totally true. And that even happens on the spiritual side too. This last film was based on a true story about adoption. A mother who, kind of rolled off the abortion table and chose to save her son's life. And just, as we would cast somebody, and then they would say, you don't know how much this means to me. And then they go and tell you their story about how they were saved, or how they were struggling with the guilt or weight of an abortion in their past. And it was just like, I can't even count how many people all had some sort of a connection to that story in their past history, from top down, from the lead actors, from executive producers. Kirk Cameron's wife is adopted, and some of their children are adopted, all the way down to day players that come in and they're like, you don't know how much this means to me just to be here and being able to tell this story. So it's amazing how that works with what's in the script on all levels, comes together.
So running in further into pre-production, so you've got your budget in place, you've got everything in place, and you're ready to start with casting. How, as a director, do you like to run your casting, and what are some considerations that you have to keep in mind with regards to the producers, what they want to have happen? I guess this is also kind of a difference between being a studio director and an independent director again, like how the producers are coming at the project and what talent is attached versus, like, running casting your way, and just how do you manage all that?
Well, COVID has definitely changed the game for casting and for pre-production in general. We were supposed to have 3 months on the ground on this last film that we shot last year, and it just got shortened and shortened down until I think we only had 5 weeks on the ground.
Goodness.
So you end up doing a lot more virtually than you would like, and our casting got moved completely virtually, which in a way has some efficiencies to it, but then in a way there's people that come on with low internet quality, and that's the best they can get. You ask them to move somewhere else, they go to a hotel, they send another video, and then when you see them in person finally, it's like, oh, you don't quite look exactly like I thought you did, because all you have are these perfected headshots that are 5 or 10 years younger, and then you've got kind of low quality, auditions that come through, so they get to send in tapes for their first round, but then it goes to kind of live stuff for callbacks, and we went through a couple rounds. But yeah, as far as, since we're kind of on this topic of kind of independent versus studio directing, this last one, Lifemark that we did was, like I said, I was kind of a studio director, so there's a lot more people in the room. I think there were in the room, but on Zoom, since it was virtual. I think there were 8 of us, I think at the most, that had to kind of put their voices in. And so when you're brought in, I think taking a step back, when you get hired as a studio director, you've got to come in and say, I'm not going to have the final say on anything. This is not my project. I'm here to be a part of the team, but I can't get my feelings hurt if my voice isn't heard or if somebody else makes a choice. And if you're not okay with that, then you don't need to be a studio director. If you want to have the final say on everything, go for it. Go make your own film and, have the say, like filmmakers like James Cameron and other people. When you watch behind the scenes, you hear their team, they're like, the directors have this specific vision in their mind, and we're here to like make that come out. Even if, they've got all the money in the world, where they're not stopped by any of those restrictions. It's just he wants it to look like this, so we're going to work for 6 months until we can make it look like that. And he's got the track record and the success to have everybody do exactly what he wants the entire time. But as a studio director, especially in the casting area, the producers or executive producers are very generous to say, we want to hear your feedback as a director and take that into consideration, but we're going to make the final call. So this film had, I think, I'm going to say about 8 people that were kind of our leads, and the executive producers, which were the Kendricks, as well as Kirk Cameron, agreed and made the final decision on those, but they allowed us, me and the other producers, to put in our notes and our feedback on who we want. So we generally agreed on the people that came through. There were a couple that some of us had our favorites, and the Kendricks had different favorites, and so they took that into consideration but made their call. But on the day players, people that either didn't have any lines or came in for a day and would have 2 or 3 lines, the Kendricks were like, hey, this is completely up to you, like here's our favorite. So they would whittle it down to 2 people per each role, and then they would say, hey, as the director, you get to pick. But then you have that pressure of, okay, well, I'm going to be the one to blame if I pick a bad person here. So you can't just run with like, oh, great, I have the power now and I'm going to go do whatever I want. It's, okay, what's the best decision here for the team? Sometimes you pick somebody and then scheduling wise, they can't move something. They've got another job. And so, okay, we know we go to the second choice we had for that person. I know the Kendricks are okay with it because they picked the top 2 or the top 3. So it's kind of half and half. The top, we had them in a list, like the top half of the characters were picked, the final choice by them, and then the bottom half by us. And the last thing I'll say on that is our lead actor was a 19-year-old boy named David, was the character name. And so the casting director received, because it was all digital and virtual casting, they received about 800 submissions for that role, and then we saw the top 40 or 50 that were, the right look, the right age, the right ethnicity, looking at, the producers and what their qualifications are for bringing actors in. Like the Kendricks are more concerned about having unity on set and and people who can take the platform, at least the people that you would think or that would end up on the poster, the kind of the main characters, if they're going to end up having speaking engagements or going and doing any press tours, are they going to handle this platform well? And are they going to turn around and do a project that might be questionable, either faith-wise or morally, and then kind of shadow that platform? And so, the casting director will look through their resumes and look at what they've done. And if anything is kind of questionable or they're not truthful in some of those things, then, we don't even see those people. So we saw about 40 people and saw their, or they went back to those people and got video submissions. So we saw about 40 submissions, from that 800. And then we whittled that down, and we still didn't have like a number one favorite. We all were like, oh, like we could make this guy work. We could make this guy work. And we had 2 weeks left until it was time to start filming. And we weren't like set on, okay, do we actually want to cast this person in our film? And so we started scratching our heads, and we were like, is there anybody else we haven't seen for this? And somebody popped into Kirk Cameron's mind, another guy popped into Alex's mind, and one guy popped into my mind. We went and contacted them, had them send in videos, and they became like our top three, and beat everybody else out in that list. And so we all had our favorites, and then the Kendricks, called and vetted them and spent a lot of time on the phone with each of those three, and then picked who they thought would be the best person, to carry that platform, as well as bringing in the acting chops. So that kind of in a nutshell was virtual casting. Sitting for days. We were on location, and it's really hard as a director when once you get on location, everybody has a question for you. Everybody needs you. Right. You're just going from meeting after meeting after meeting, and every meeting is about the script. It's what does the script look like? What does the script cost? What order do we do this? Everything is just all about the script. And then they're like, okay, you need to block out 6 hours for casting. And it's like, I want to cast, and I want to find who's going to be in our film. But at the same time, they're doing paint mock-ups on the wall, and they're doing, fabric samples. And it's just like, it's hard to sit down and focus. And, but whenever you've got a short budget and a short time frame, you've just got to kind of pick those battles. So they try to organize and schedule that. But as soon as your casting's done, you've got 5 people waiting outside your door. Like, okay, here's all the stuff from the day we need to ask you and we need to go through.
Yeah, that's so interesting that you bring that out. Because casting, is already like kind of a beast. And then, you add the element of when we're making Christian films, and especially with someone who has a platform like the Kendrick Brothers, that's a really tricky balance. And that's, there's just so many things to take into consiration. So
that's really true.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
And I will quickly say to the actors out there that are listening, that initial decision of like, okay, who do we want to be in the film? There's different ways of kind of pooling that. Like, for example, this film, Kirk Cameron was attached to it before we even started. So we knew Kirk Cameron's going to be in it. And then you've got to, for his spouse, you've got to pair somebody who's the right age and those types of things. And then there's the breakdowns that go out on different websites that are kind of just mass sent out. But then all of us bring lists of people that, hey, I've worked with this person before. They're just a joy to work with. And, we had a special system that we would send in to the casting director, all of our kind of special picks that they would go out, the casting director would go out and say, hey, you've been asked to audition for this project. And some of that is just from auditions on other films or doing, at the film festival in Florida. They had like an open casting call. So it wasn't for a particular project. It was just seeing people. And cool. I did that 2 years before this film came up, but I kept all those headshots. And so It's like when it comes around, you can still remember there was that one guy in his 30s that just blew me away. His headshot's in here somewhere. And so, if you don't get the job on one audition, it doesn't go well. Right. Just know that there are directors like me and others out there that are holding onto your headshots and will remember you. If you're memorable and you did a great job, it's not that you're a bad actor, you're just not the right one for that project, or you don't pair up well, especially when you're doing a story like the ones we do where we go through time and you have to have people that look like younger, older versions of themselves. There's a lot of factors that go into who's right for the role, but I had like 50 headshots in a folder in my closet and pulled them out and went through and found the ones that were right for this project, and we called them and got them in, and some work, some don't work. So if you're an actor out there, hang in there. We haven't forgotten about you.
Yay.
Yeah, that's super encouraging. Yeah, because sometimes if you're doing acting or whatever it is that you do in film, and you feel like, I don't know, you're just kind of spinning your wheels, like you never know what connection is going to lead to your next project. So that's very encouraging. Thanks for sharing that.
That's how it happened for Stephanie Parker.
Okay.
She sat down. She didn't get a slot in this audition at this film festival, and so she sat down as a kind of a producer just to listen to the auditions, and we got sat at a table next to each other and just talking with her in between the auditions and just getting to know her. She gave me her headshot, and so I didn't even see her audition that day, but I had her headshot and just was like, she was just so memorable. And we auditioned her, and for the character, I think there were 7 or 8 other people that auditioned for that role, and as soon as she auditioned, all of us were just like, she's totally the one. And so it's like 3 years later from that meeting, we held on to her information, and she got hired, and she was in the film, and just her side of the story, the details around getting cast at that time was just perfect for her, and it was just, you could see it was God's timing kind of all the way through.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
That's so cool. And that's such a good reminder too, even because I feel like I don't do a great job with this, but sometimes it's really easy to get discouraged. And like in that situation, if she would have either like left or, maybe sat at your table, but been really grouchy about it because she didn't get an audition, like she would have made a really bad impression.
Right.
But instead, by just being humble and, just looking for opportunities wherever they are, it led to a role. So that's really cool.
Yeah. I feel like that kind of, and I'm about to say something that we say sometimes this is not the right way to do things, but how they say, if you want to be an actor, sometimes maybe you should pursue crew. And while I think it is important to like have your boundaries and like, no, I want to make sure that I stay like true to myself and don't like spread myself too thin or have people see me do one thing and then I get hired for something I don't want to end up doing. But I mean, it is really cool to have like an on set or even at festivals to just have a presence where people, and not to be proud about it, where you're like, I'm putting myself in a place of service so that others will see me serve and they'll be like, yeah, that's a cool person. But like to be putting yourself in, allowing to be used in different areas and just having humility about things is really cool. And even if you're able to like, okay, I'm able to do this tiny part, but I'd be willing to work crew or to do something else. It can be helpful, especially for independent filmmakers who are just like, they probably need a PA or they might need somebody else. So it's like if you're willing to like make yourself available, I feel like that's number one. It's you're getting more on set time to like learn and watch other people work and learn more about the environment. And then it's just to hang out with people and do a job. Maybe I got to be a very, very small role on a recent film with Rich Cristiano. But I took a crew position as well. And it was really, really cool to take that crew position, to learn more about that position, to watch him direct and to like learn from what he was doing directing, and then to have fun while acting too. So it's like, I feel like, being able to do more than just one thing is, I don't know, sometimes it can be draining, but I feel like if you come at it with the right attitude, I feel like it can be really, really helpful.
Yeah. I think that's the balance, is you don't want to stretch yourself too thin.
Right.
But if you can do other things, I mean, it's going to make you more well-rounded as a person, which will make you a better actor.
Yeah. And you learn, and especially like, if you want to go into directing, which I would love, I'm like writing down questions that I like want to learn from you, Kevin. And you know, it's really cool because if you do these other positions, you can like watch people and like you see what they do and how they interact with people. And it's like, I think
see all
that's
the different styles of directing.
and that's honestly like really cool. You're like, you know what? I don't want to do that, but that is a really good tip right there. And like make notes or something about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That reminds me of a unique experience. If you guys want to use this or include this. So when this project, you know, for the Kendrick Brothers started out, before COVID hit, the Kendricks were working on 2 other films at the same time, Show Me the Father and then the Courageous Legacy re-release. So they had 3 projects going, and so they were initially going to be a lot less involved in this film. But then when COVID hit and it pushed our film back from shooting, and then they were able to do their other 2, they were a lot more available once it came time. And so Alex was on set a lot more than he originally intended to be. And so that can be very intimidating as a director, like, especially when you're coming in to fill his shoes. And then, you know, I went from being doing behind the scenes work and marketing work for them. You're in a position when you're technically like not on the crew because you're not a part of any department. You're not under department head. You don't have to go to any department head meetings. You can just kind of freely roam. You're paid to be there, but you're just allowed to go anywhere, do whatever you want. So in a way, you're not really kind of on that crew that is needed to get every single, you know, shot done. You don't go into overtime like any of the crew departments do. You're just there. So moving, you know, from that position to, like, it would have been an honor just to be invited to like, hey, would you sit next to me, you know, at the monitor and just give me your feedback, you know, on the scenes, to now you're in the main chair and then Alex is right next to you, kind of like, hey, can I give you my feedback on your scenes? It was such a weird kind of experience, but about halfway through the shoot, I remember Alex coming up to me and he was just like, I'm just amazed that there hasn't been any kind of complaining or any kind of you know, ego with like, would you get out of here or would you you know, not do that? And not trying to brag on myself, but just knowing, as I said, you know, if you're ever in that kind of position, what helped me was going into it each day was saying, this is not my film, this is not my project, this is theirs. So I'm looking at it as if, okay, if Alex were in that chair and I was just sitting next to him, just being able to speak, you know, into his ear would be an honor. So any amount of involvement or change he wants to bring is already better than any other scenario that you could kind of imagine as, you know, a director kind of moving their way up. And early on he was like, you know, there's no pressure, but if there's any scenes that I could direct, I'd love the chance to. He's like, again, it's your project. I'm not trying to take over, but you could tell he was just like, I really want to do this again and I want to be here. And so there was 2 scenes that he wrote completely himself that were added into a series of scenes that I had written. And so I was like, obviously you wrote those and, you know, your comedy beats are in there. So, you know, why don't you direct those scenes? And so just working so fast up to those days. And then it was like time for him to kind of direct the scene. And like I had a break and it was just like, this is the first time in weeks that like no one's been asking me questions. And I'm like, I could go and watch right now, or like I could just relax and like, take a nap, break.
Maybe.
So it was a nice break. But it was just really, really cool. And we kind of got into a groove where, you know, he enjoys working with the actors a little bit more than I do, and I enjoy working with the camera side because I have a camera and lighting background that I brought into it. And you know, he said himself, he's like, I'm more of a storyteller than kind of visual. He's like, I could care less if the camera's over here. You know, I want to like tell this story. And so when our budget, you know, cut a week off of our filming and we had to go down to 3.5 weeks instead of 4 weeks, you know, there was a lot going on. So there were times where it was like, hey, well, you know these scenes, go work with the actors here, I'll work with the camera here. And so there were a lot of scenes we had kind of two directors, going, and it was a blast just to, just to know that like things are getting taken care of and I don't have to worry about as much. And I trust what he's going to do, because if he was doing it all by himself, it's going to turn out great. Maybe it would turn out even better than my involvement. So I'm just here to do what I can do, and he's doing what he can do. And so it really worked out well.
And that's so cool, because when you both bring that level of humility to the set or the project, that's where you can have, I think, the most bestest, I don't know what I was gonna say, the best collaboration, I think. And yeah, like that leads to not having stress on set where you guys are, arguing with each other or clashing. Instead, you have like this really sweet thing where, you can be more efficient, you can have a better end product, and just like, I don't know, have fun doing it, I guess. That's really cool.
It's really refreshing to hear your humility, and that you found a way to balance letting go and both keeping your creative leadership, but also like letting go in certain areas, and like, and that it can be done, because that is something that I actually wanted. That was one of our questions that we wanted to ask about, like your relationship with the producers and how you like manage that unity. Because that's something that even I'm like wrestling with ahead of, like, not that I'm at anything, but just like in the small things that I want to be pursuing, that I'm like, well, how do I, make sure that I'm like, no, I don't want to do it that way. It's gotta be this way. But then it's like, but like, coming at it with an idea that, and I do like this idea that it is everyone's project. It's not just yours. And while, you're kind of like the one, you have to be the leader. You have to like, you can't just let everyone do what they want, whatever they want, because then it like becomes chaotic. But like maintaining unity, but like, what the gaffer is like, he's like, or he or she, women in film.
2022. So
he or she is like taking some creative ownership. Like, this is my movie, I'm working on it. Or the PA over there, like if the PA takes creative, like an ownership, like I worked on that movie. Like this is kind of like something that I feel like if all the crew is able and the actors are able to take an ownership in the project, well, it makes everyone's day happier, because they're like, well, one, if they like the film that they're doing, like if they feel like they're being valued and they're like putting some of their stock into the project, it makes it makes it more like a collaboration. And I really like that idea. I feel like I'm gonna have to learn that. I'm gonna have to like continually learn that. But that's really, I really love that you shared that perspective.
Yeah, you said so many good things in there. Starting out with kind of with that delegation. Well, I guess let me say, doing a paid project where everyone's paid versus something with volunteers.
Right.
There is a lot more of that ownership in there, and everybody's trying to advance their career. And so when they get paid well, they don't have any of those, bills and things of life to kind of worry about. That's taken care of, and they're here. That gaffer or that production designer or that wardrobe person, they're going to be doing the best job that they can, because when people see it, they're going to say, hey, I loved what you did with the lighting in that film, and they want to get hired. And they're not going to do a bad job. So if you surround yourself with a good team, and you pay everybody well, and they understand all those expectations, then that's what makes it easy as a leader to delegate to that person, because they're going to do a good job. When you surround yourself with all volunteers, no matter how enthusiastic they are, or people who aren't passionate about what their hands are doing on that particular project, that's when it's like, well, I could get this done faster if I did it myself rather than delegating it to them. And that's where you find yourself not delegating as much because you're worried about kind of that end product. Right. And when you mentioned kind of, without those boundaries, we have chaos. And so as a leader, it's not coming in and saying, I want you to do everything my way, but it's saying, here's the boundaries of, like this character, I want them to wear no patterns and this color palette and this kind of a thing. Then they can go out there almost with more energy, and they've got freedom to pick whatever textures and all these things, but they know, okay, I can't go here and I can't go here.
Yeah.
You know, like if you're looking for an apartment or you're looking for a movie to rent, you know, if you know what city that apartment's going to be in, okay, now I can go and look. But if it's like, where am I going to look?
Right.
You know, it's a lot harder to make that decision. So as a leader, it's coming in, and I think the best thing about a leader is being able to encourage them, so that they then have that passion and don't feel drained to do what they are passionate about. And so it's, you know, hey, I love this track that you're on. Don't go quite as far over here to this side. Stick a little bit more over here, but just go for it. And I trust you with whatever. And you have to believe those words that you're saying. Do you really trust them to make that decision? Because you don't have time for them to come back and then be like, no, I really don't like that. Like, delegating to them is not the time for you to be making up your mind. Unless you say, bring me 2 different phones and I'll pick my favorite one, then they know he's going to make a choice and they're going to go out and look for 2 choices. But if you say, hey, I trust you to go find something, you know, between 1980 and 1985, and it needs to have a chord, but I trust you, and then you've got to be happy with what you gave them to do, but you know they're going to go out and do the best that they can, and it all works out. So
yeah, because they're gonna now be fulfilling like the vision that you've allowed them to have in the project. And then it's like, oh, now they have something that they're doing. And yeah.
I had a follow-up question. This is going back just a little bit, but it's still about collaboration. Specifically, because you were talking about in the movie that you directed, how Kirk Cameron was, I think you said executive producer as well as actor.
Oh.
Right.
So how do you balance that when you're working with talent who is also a producer? How do you kind of manage that dynamic?
Yeah, so Alex Kendrick was in the film as well, and he was an executive producer. So I've got two lead actors who are both executive producers. But it really just goes back to, you know, reminding yourself before you get into it at the start of the project, and then every day, this is not my project. This is not you know, my final say, and so they've got the final say. But we set up a relationship beforehand that, kind of like you have on set, you know, certain, like the director is the one who goes up and approaches the actors, you know, and so they said, okay, even if we're executive producers, we're going to come to you with something if we, you know, find a problem with it, and you're going to go to the actor, and we're going to keep that chain of command. So when we're acting, we're actors, you know, and we're not going to come in. You're not going to see us like all 3 or all 4 going to an actor and giving different notes. And you know, so Kirk is not going to
actor,
right.
Poor actor.
So they were professional enough to know where their role was, where their position was, you know, at what time. And then again, as being a studio director, if they came to me with those notes and I said, I don't agree with you, I don't want to go tell those notes, and it was like compromising their vision or their project, then they would be able to say, okay, you're out. Alex is going to step in. You're not fulfilling, you know, that. So if you've got the ability to, you know, and some of those notes might be like, you know, well, I really love what they're doing here. They want me to do something different. Okay, so their request or their note for the actor, that now becomes number 1 priority. If we've got time, let's get both. And there were a handful of scenes where, you know, the actors would have, you know, we'd have enough time. So it's like, okay, you know, Alex would prefer, or we as a team would prefer, let's go ahead and cut this line and do it this way, or cut this motion, you know, for time. And to not busy the actor with too much. You don't say, hey, we're doing all these different versions or doing this. It's just, okay, hey, we're going to go this direction. And then, hey, we've got time for one more take. Hey, do you think on this take we could go back, put that back in, give it your best? So they feel like, hey, they're just giving me options. They're not worried about all the different voices. Now the producers are happy because they got the version that they want. And then in the edit, we can now decide, you know, what do we go for? And if you don't have time at the end of the day, you know that, okay, my idea doesn't make it. The Kendrick's idea made it through. You know, hopefully you get and figure out those things before you start shooting the scene, but there are sometimes you don't realize it until you see it blocked out. And, you know, there were 2 scenes that we had, And as we were setting them up, we were like, that they need to be in the opposite order. Scene 51 needs to be before scene 50. So how does that change how they enter and exit the scene? And, it's like, okay, that's kind of a big enough scene. So I run up to Alex and I say, hey, here's my thought. I think it needs to be flipped, and then it's up to him. Does he agree with that or not? And then he was like, you know what? I think that makes sense. Let's go for it. So I've got permission. Then we go and you put it into action, and on the fly, the scenes are out of order, and it made them work.
I think what you mentioned earlier about talking about, in studio versus on location. I think that's a big one. And like whether it's like cost effective, because for a lot of indie productions, we don't really do studios. We're just going to go to some neighbor's house and shoot there, and it's all groovy. Or, ask people from church, and that's always like, and that's really, really beautiful when people just like, either donate their house or like, let us use it with permission and everything. But I feel like, talking about studios versus live environments is important.
Yeah.
Well, do you have a preference in terms of like, because obviously, when you're in a studio, it's a more controlled environment. But what's your preference as a director in terms of being in like a real environment, like someone's house versus like a studio?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it really goes back to the script. It depends on what that scene calls for, because if it's just a conversation around the table, around the couch, right. See what the location provides, and if it's somewhere that needs, for example, we had some hospital scenes. And, this film was filmed in Georgia in the same sound stages that Overcomer was filmed in, the last Kendrick Brothers film. And so, there was that benefit that there's already some sets that are built. They filmed in Overcomer, they had a hospital scene where they filmed the hallway in a real hospital, because you have this 100-foot long hallway with all these doors, and you can have all these extras and all this kind of stuff. But for all those intimate scenes in that hospital room, it's easier to build that room on set because it's quieter, and you can remove a wall and get all of your crew. You can do the lighting that you want to, and so it worked to match up that real location to the set that way. And so there's kind of those practical things. But now it's post-COVID, and we were kind of right in the middle of COVID, where everybody was on lockdown and panicked to the point where it was like, okay, the hospitals are not going to let us in at all. So that's completely out. So we can use the hospital set, but now we've got to build a hallway as well, because it's a location that we can't film in at all. So that's a benefit of a studio, is you don't have to deal with all the politics and all those restrictions that they have on those locations. So sometimes the location's not even available, and you've got to build it. Same thing goes for hotels and kind of other big public spaces. But some of it comes down to, budgeting. When you're looking at the budget, it may be cheaper to use a house than to build one. But then, okay, what are the company moves if you've got a crew of a certain size per day?
Right.
The time you lose to go from your morning devotions and your morning meeting to driving there, your shooting time is now down to like 2 hours versus 4 or 5 hours. So how do you budget that money versus how your shooting time is, and how much time do you need actually shooting with your actors? And you want as much of your money to go to the time when you're filming with your actors, and not to moving people and parking trucks and blocking streets and all those kinds of things. So we were able on this one to save budget and work in sets that were already built and modify them, so we didn't have to build them from scratch or pre-hang the grids from scratch. So a lot of work was already done there. Like you can see in this picture, this was a bedroom that we built. And one of the things you can tell in movies that film on sound stages is you typically don't see the ceilings. And in real locations, you see the ceilings, because you've got, whenever somebody stands up in a normal room, you can easily just pan up and there's a ceiling there. But that's where all of your lighting is hung. And so on television shows, you hardly ever see a ceiling. Going all the way back to shows like I Love Lucy, when they first started kind of that multi-camera format. If you pay attention, you'll actually see that the walls are higher than normal because they still need to get the people standing up, but they have all of their lighting gear and everything overhead. And so, they build the fake walls and it's like 10-foot, 12-foot walls, but nobody really thinks about it. So in this room, we had a vaulted ceiling with these foam panels that could come out so that we could put lights in where we needed to, but then on the wide shots, we could see the ceiling and show the ceiling. So there's some tricks and things that we do there, but, at the end of the day, it's part economical. We can keep everybody together. We can shoot rain or shine. And we can use our studio days as kind of backup days. So we had our first half of our shoot was exteriors, and then our last half of our shoot was interiors. But then if it rains, then we just stay at the studio and flip our schedule and shoot there, and we don't lose a day, or we don't have, something that way. So I would love one day to do a film that actually has rain in it, because it's like low budget films. It never rains. It's like always sunny and dry, and it's like, why does that always happen? It's it's a budget thing.
That is really cool, because like if there's so many films that we'll work on, and there's like rain and or there's like something happened and you just don't have any other locations secured for that day because the owners of the house aren't available except for the day that like you slotted or whatever. So that'd be really cool to have like the studio that you can just go to shoot at, and you have your own environment and it's all controlled. Your art people were able to do everything they needed to it. They can paint it however they want.
It also, having a more controlled environment makes the post-production process a lot easier.
Sure the editors are happy.
Speaking of post-production.
I see what you did there.
Oh my goodness.
Yes,
look at that.
I'm so excited to talk about post-production
really
with you.
segue.
Thank you. I was pretty proud of that one. That's why I drew it out for so long. If we're good to jump into post-production, I would love to talk about how you work with an editor, and specifically because I know there's like a lot of like technical things that go into it, but could you talk a little bit about how you go about kind of communicating your vision to an editor, and especially when you're working as like a studio director and you're kind of communicating your vision and the producer's vision? How do you go about doing that? When are those conversations happening in the process? And if you could just talk a little bit about that.
Well, I have been blessed on these last two films to be able to have first edit on the film as well.
Wow, nice.
The film Like Arrows that we did a couple of years ago, I was actually the only editor, but would pass the edits on to Alex, and they would make notes and pass it on to the final client as well, because Alex and the Kendricks on that film weren't the end client. They were kind of in partnership, but it was a third party that would make all the final decisions. And they would take any feedback from the Kendricks very seriously and kind of consider that in. And so again, like I've said before, it's just that mindset of they want to see what I can bring to the table, but at the end of the day, it's their call, and I can't be so attached to it, that I'm going to get upset about any of these notes or kind of things. And that can be tough. It can be stressful to know that, like, I really love this scene or this take, and then, to find out that your scene gets cut in half, or a beat that you just really fall in love with as an editor doesn't make it. But if at the end of the day you're just like, I'm just honored to be here, and I could kind of care less how it turns out in a way. Like you kind of have to tell yourself that if it has to be my way, then I shouldn't be in this position. And so you just have to say, I don't really care. You're going to change it, and it doesn't matter to me. So on this film, on Lifemark, they asked me, how do you want to handle the editing? Do you want to edit it by yourself? What do you want to do? And I love the aspect of teamwork. That was one of the things getting into film. When you're a kid and you get a first video camera and you're doing things by yourself, like you just want people to do it with you, and you want to be able to work with your friends. And you hate being in your room by yourself, just like, okay, I'm going to film my action figures again today. Like, I want to work with a team. And so I was like, I love directing, and I love kind of overseeing in that visionary side more than just sitting down and editing. I've been editing for 17 years, and it really gets tiring.
Wow. Yeah.
And so I'm like, I would love to work with the team on this and really just edit the fun stuff. So on these films, we have an on-set editor that edits like a day behind what we shoot. So on Tuesday, they're putting together the stuff that we shot on Monday in a really, really rough, quick edit, but it allows producers and studios to see, are the performances good? Are things coming together? Do we have to reshoot anything? They can send it off to potential distributors and other people who are interested, or if a studio is involved, then send it off to the studio so the studio can see and be involved and see what's going on. And so at the end of the film or end of production, you end up with a completely edited film already, but it's a lot longer. The editors really do only look at what you call our circle takes. So my script supervisor at the end of each scene will have a take or two that are kind of my circled favorites, and so the onset editor will go to those first. And then if there is a continuity problem or something really big, or they have time, then they'll go and they'll look through other takes, but they don't look through everything. And usually that cut is like 2 hours plus, because they just put everything in there. They're not thinking about pacing or anything like that. So it's different than your dailies. Your dailies are just kind of your just dump of everything from that day. But at the end of the filming, we have what we call version 0 of the film that we can all watch, and we can see like how things feel and how we like things. So I requested on this film, I'm like, hey, can we work on this together so I don't have the pressure of editing everything myself? Because that's the challenge as an editor, is especially when you have a deadline and you come in and you have to, whenever you're paid to edit and you have to edit, it's like a creative thing. It's not like, just kind of doing a mundane task like painting or something where you don't really have to think about it. But it's like if you're not feeling it that day, like writing a song or designing something, what have you, when you can kind of edit what you want and what you feel like, then there's a lot more creativity, and that creativity is not stifled. So our on-set editor, his name is Bill Ebel, who's worked on some other Kendrick films as well. He started with kind of polishing his on-set version, and then I started making my version based off of his version. So knowing that there was already a full edit there, I would watch it and go in and say, okay, this scene, I have a completely different vision for, so let me start from scratch. Or, there were scenes that he did great, and it was like, I love this, but there was one shot here that I wanted to cut to instead, and so I would just switch out a few camera angles and be fine with it. And it's great to know kind of as a team that, like, sometimes it comes down to differences of opinion where his is not necessarily better or mine's not necessarily worse, but it's just different. And, you watch it and you're like, hey, I never thought of it that way. I could change it, but it's great. So I'm just going to leave it as is, but I'm going to add this one wide shot that I really wanted here to show this moment, and I'm going to move on. And so we both submitted our versions to the Kendricks, and then Alex took it from there to polish and do a final version. And it typically goes through 4 or 5 versions before it's, the final one. And then you send it to studios or distributors, and if they have any say or opinion, then those kind of get incorporated and audience feedback. So hopefully that answered your question on that side of the thing. But on this one, I had the freedom to not have the pressure of doing it all myself. I was able to work with the team, and I probably touched about 80% of the film, with changes. And some of that was just a few scenes. Some of that was, okay, let me start from complete scratch and, edit the scene because I had it in my head. And there was one scene where I think we had like 13 setups on this big scene because there was a crowd and there were lots of different players. And so I went through the script and I color coordinated where each shot was going to be in the scene to help us get through our day. And knowing that, okay, this long it was 10 scenes because we were cutting back between 2 locations.
Oh, wow.
And there's some, you guys might have seen some scenes in movies where when they cut back to a line of dialogue, the camera's moving around the actors for that one bit of their conversation. And then it cuts back to somebody else in a spaceship or somebody else like flying here. And it's like they have it scripted out where they know that this line is going to be this camera move. So we don't have to film that camera move or that camera setup for the entire scene. It's only going to be for this one line. And so the scene was split up. It became 10 scenes because we cut to somebody else who was listening to something going on here. So we know, okay, when we come back, it's going to be a fresh camera angle. So we're only going to film this one, bit here. So as a director, kind of letting them know in the edit, I'm only going to edit this part. And so some of the crew who don't see that in their minds are thinking, well, we're only filming this one part of the paragraph. Like, why don't we film a little bit more? And you just have to say, okay, it's good because we're going to catch it from this angle over here. And you end up with all these different angles that you only use for one bit here and there, and put it all together. Right. So that's kind of the fun as a director, and even as a studio director, being able to bring that creativity to a scene where they could care less if it's got 6 setups or 12 setups, but you bring that interchange back and forth, and then you carry that through to the edit. And, the other editor was kind of like, I'm not going to touch this scene because it's got so many setups. I don't even know how you want to do it. So, you go for it. So we would work together, and it was great to work as a team.
Yeah. And that's, the best thing you can do for your post-production process is good pre-production. So, amen to that. Yeah, that's really good. Yeah. Have you, I don't know if this is something that's like super applicable, but if you were, or just when you're communicating with your editor, how do you sort of like establish boundaries in the sense of how much of the final product is going to be your voice or the producer's voice or the editor's voice? Because obviously, as an editor, I always want I want the end product to be something that I can be proud of, but kind of like we've been talking about, you also have to have that humble approach of this isn't my project. And at the end of the day, people above me need to get the end product that they want. So how do you kind of balance that where there's, often when there's like so many different voices, it can easily become disjointed. So how do you kind of unify that and talk through that process with your editor?
That's a great question. I think in my experience, one of the boundaries is just time. For me, they give me a time frame as, being able to have kind of the first edit. It's you've got the freedom and you have 2 months to do it in. Show us, it's kind of like an audition. It's you put your best foot forward and show us what you want to have. And if it's a great idea, then other people are going to agree to it and it's going to stick and it's going to make it. And if it's a bad idea, then it's not going to make it. And so usually knowing that like there's a group of people, and at the end of the day, that the final group is the audience. You try something, and if half of the audience comes back and has a critique about that one thing, then whether you love it or not, that's best for the final product to get rid of that, one thing. But if there's that, okay, we only had one person to give us feedback on this, then it can kind of come down to that final moment where they say, okay, do you have any final feedback? And it's like, okay, do I want to fight for that, one moment? Like, okay, I know this thing is on the fence here. Here's why I would love to have it in there. Do you believe in it enough to bring it up and to fight for it? And at the end of the day, if it's not really worth it, then you don't bring it up and that idea might die. Are you okay with that, letting that idea die? Or hey, this whole scene was meant around this one shot when I started, so I'd really love for that to be in there. And then at that point, if everyone's like, hey, yeah, okay, we agree, that's good, then it makes it. So we had a conversation beforehand, with, going to post-production, how's this kind of teamwork relationship going to work? And, I was very clear that, I'm not trying to have like my entire vision across every single thing. It's been a teamwork, from the beginning. Like once you write it and you give it to an actor, it becomes something different than, what you set out to be. So it's already now something completely new. And then once you get that footage back and you start to edit, you can try to piece together what you had in your mind a year ago, but it's going to be different. There's a few moments that come through and you're like, oh, that's exactly what we captured, and it's awesome. And then sometimes an actor does something and you're like, that was so much better. That joke was even funnier, or they ad-libbed and it totally made the scene better. But it was a little confusing for, for the other people. Like maybe I should say Alex edits a little bit differently than me. He likes to make his own edit of a scene and then watch the other teammates and see what they do. And so that he's not influenced by it's one person's or it's not, because some people have certain strengths. Some people are better at editing dialogue scenes. Some people are better at editing action scenes. And so Alex will edit what he feels he likes, and then he'll watch them and he might say, okay, well, that one's actually better. That one captures the moment better, so we'll use that. Or it's a merge, like part of my scene's better, part of his is better. So that's kind of what his process is. And for me, I didn't have a problem watching the other person's edit and letting that kind of help me and either tell me, that's not the direction that we went when we wrote this or we shot this, so here's the changes I'm going to make. Or, that's great. I could have come up with something maybe 10% different, but it's not that different that it's going to change it. So I'm just going to go with what he did and, build off of him. So we have our differences in how we edit, and we work together. And at the end of the day, knowing, Alex is going to make the final say on this, and that's really the hard part. Like, I'm actually waiting on an email any minute for the next version, from him, and it's like 20 or 18 minutes shorter than my version, and so you're kind of wondering what scenes are cut out. What did I want to have in there?
Part of the baby.
But it's been enough time from watching mine that I can't go into it with like, okay, how did my scene go? And because then I'm just going to want to critique it and complain about any of those changes. I just need to sit back and say, do I enjoy this? And if there's something that I just can't shake, I can't get rid of in my mind of like, oh, I really feel connected about that, then okay, that's the one note that I'm going to bring back and say, would you reconsider this? But I can't go into it with trying to make it go back to my version, or I'm never going to be happy.
Yeah, that's so great. I love the analogy that you used of like auditioning scenes and saying, here's an idea. Because that's something that I've been trying to learn and grow in as an editor, is to balance being confident in your skills and your ability to edit a scene, but also obviously realizing, like, especially as the director, you've been living with this script for longer than I have. So I very well might miss something that's like, oh, that's actually, kind of an important character thing. We need to see this, or whatever the case may be, something that might be better. So just balancing that, like, I think not getting discouraged is the big thing, is just being willing to throw ideas at the wall and be okay with whatever sticks and whatever needs to be changed. So that was really good.
Like Michael Bay, on his films, he hires 3 different editors to edit his movie. Okay. And so he gets 3 different versions of every single scene, and then he just, as a director, gets to pick what he likes. And so that's kind of an audition on steroids, where you're competing. Wow. It's, can I make this scene impress the director better than the other 2 people,
Wow.
Yes.
that are editing that. And then there's some people that edit in a particular style, and, directors go to them because they know, okay, they're going to be able to pull this out of a performance that only the editor can see, because, like you said, it's the director might have been connected to that story longer than you as the editor has, but you as the editor now have the privilege of looking at what's available, because again, that version that the director had in his mind, even if it was 2 years ago, doesn't exist anymore. It's only with what footage you have as an editor to work with. And the best performance might have a continuity issue that doesn't work up with your master and your wide shot. And you as the editor have to say, okay, what you could tell was shot isn't working, so I've got to pick and change something. So can I edit this in a way that the director doesn't notice that this has been edited? If you can watch a scene and you don't notice that there's any editing done, as a director, that's what you want. And it might be like, hey, there was a moment on set I remember, can you go put this back in there? That doesn't mean that you edited it wrong. That just means the director remembered something and he had a favorite take over here, and then as an editor you can say, oh, I tried your favorite take, but he stood up a line before he was supposed to, so his exit doesn't work, so here's what we can work with, and they can or can't argue with that in a way. So,
and sometimes that leads to like some opportunities for you as the editor to like try and find some creative solutions where it's like, yeah, the director really wants this take, doesn't really work continuity wise. Is there a creative way that we can try and solve this? Or and so you can again just have that collaboration with the director and try and find the best happy medium.
Yeah. And I was literally talking to somebody, what was it? I think I mentioned the third story. Editing is the third story.
Yeah.
And I mean, it might actually be closer to like fourth or fifth story, depending on like how long your process of getting it from the original idea to actually editing. But it is, and you were saying when you were talking about like, I think the difference between like your original vision and then what the actors bring to the table, and what everyone brings to the table creatively and technically is really, really beautiful to see. I'm speaking from like, if you wrote the story and to see your original vision kind of like blossom, and maybe it's different. Maybe it's kind of like you thought of a rose when you were like putting it in flowers. I said the word bloom, so now we're on flowers.
Flower
now.
analogies.
So if originally you were thinking of a rose, but it's kind of turned into this cool tiger lily, and you're like, you know what? That is really cool. And I do think it's really, really cool to see something different and hopefully better than what you originally, when you were thinking of it on set, and then the editors get a hold of it. And that is cool about the editors having fresh eyes, because then they can come at it, like you were saying, with like creative solutions and all that.
That makes me think about, when you're location scouting and you get, there's some locations that the location is going to be pretty much exactly what you've imagined. Like if you're shooting in a basketball gym, or in this film, like you're shooting on a train, there's not, whatever you find is pretty much going to be blocked out exactly like you want, or exactly like you have. And, there's some things where you get to an exterior location, or, something in nature, or things where, or even somebody's house, and it's, maybe it's a complete 180 flip of what you had in your mind, and you've got to reverse it. Or, you've got a picture in your mind. Like for us, we're basing this off a true story. So there's moments in the true story, because it was a documentary that started this. And so there's pictures of things that happened, and you're trying to recreate that, in movie form. And kind of like you said, with your analogy of a flower, there's those moments where, okay, I had this thing in my head, but this location that we have is nothing like what we had. Okay, well, what is the heart of the scene? What is the heart of the moment that is here? Because if you can't even find that heart of that scene or that moment, then is it even necessary for the project or the script or the story to begin with? But if it's crucial, for the scene, then, okay, now we have this amazing team of professionals. How do we take the heart of this, throwing everything else out, and getting this across and communicating this idea? If this is the scene where he gets the phone call, or this is the moment that they meet, that's the heart of that moment, is them meeting. And so, you look and say, okay, how can we light this and make this amazing? How can we dress this and make it amazing? How can we edit this and make this amazing? So while we're on post-production, going to some of your thoughts on editing for somebody else, find, okay, well, what is the heart of this scene? What is the point of this being in here? And can I communicate that with what I have in front of me? Because that's all you have. You can't, there could be like, okay, we couldn't find an exterior of our hospital for our establishing shot, so I don't have that. So that's coming. So you put in a placeholder, or, things like that, like, okay, we've got to do pickup shots and go get these wide shots because we have to have it. But other than that, you've got everything in front of you. As a director, you want that editor to bring you something that communicates that basic foundation of that moment or that scene? And am I moved by it? At the end of the day, am I moved? And is there transformation? Because if there's no transformation, then we haven't moved forward, so it doesn't need to be there. And as an editor, you might find, okay, the performances that we got or the way it turned out, or now that we can see it with life, breathed into it, it doesn't move us forward. And that's where you might drop a scene. There was half a scene that I remember was like, okay, I wrote this and I shot this and I put this in here, but now that it's breathed out and has that life in it, it doesn't work. And I'm not even going to send this in and show this to Alex because I don't even think that it works. And so it's taking those bold steps of finding that moment. And, if there's no movement, the director might love it, but the audience is going to notice that this needs to be a deleted scene. It doesn't need to be in here. And at the end of the day, did you move the scene and the story forward?
Yeah. And I love how we were talking about editing at some point, and I feel like it's really cool for an editor to be able to use performances. I think you were talking about how you can use pieces of performances and like make everything work seamlessly,
like and pull parts of a performance and use it in a different moment.
Yeah. And I think that's really cool because like, even if you were like, you had a take and you're like, that was good over here, wasn't so good over there. Like, you have options. You can do like weird stuff. I don't know. I think that's really, really cool too. Editors can
absolutely
make magic happen.
Editors have too much power sometimes, but but it does allow for you to try and find those creative solutions and just say like, okay, we need, this is oversimplified, but we need a beat where this person is sad and they weren't sad enough in any of these takes. So then you go and find something from another part of the scene and you're like, there you go. Now the audience feels sad for this person.
You just cut to the wide and like drop all sound. You're like, yep, that's a beat.
I've actually done that before. I just cut to a wide. Just make it super awkward. Yeah. No, but I think, man, there's been just a lot of really great stuff. I'm sure we could keep going, but I feel like you had a lot of great things to say about post-production, so I appreciate you sharing your wisdom with us. I think our last question as we kind of start to wrap up here was, do you have any advice? This is maybe a little broad, but would you have any advice for any of our listeners who might be either first-time filmmakers or just early on in their career? Just any advice or wisdom that you could impart to them and to how to continue to improve in their craft or to, I don't know, be a good person to work with. Just any sage wisdom that you want to pass on to young filmmakers out there.
Definitely.
Any age.
Two thoughts that I've got. The first one is don't be afraid to fail. When taking on a project where you're not only doing a project for somebody else, but you're kind of filling their shoes and kind of taking on their mantle. It's easy to say, I could just not do this and no one's going to be mad at me for making a mistake. I'm not going to get any bad reviews. Like if I just say no to this, then everything will be easier. But you can't be afraid to fail, and you're going to get criticism from, there's always going to be somebody who doesn't like what you did. You're not going to be able to make a movie for everybody. So just make a movie really for you, because if you enjoy it and you're passionate about it, there's going to be an audience for it. There's some movies that have commercially flopped and then they pick up kind of a cult following, years later, maybe even a decade later, of people who love it, and it's because you were passionate and you fell in love with it and you were trying to tell something. So, if you're going to pick up a project, I've always told myself that you're going to spend a year on it before it's ever going to be out there. And are you willing to stick with this idea for a year? If you can't stay with it that long, then that's a good sign that you should pass on it and move on to something else. There's scripts that I've started writing and 3 or 4 years later, it's like, I still want to tell this story. I still want to get this out. That's the passion that you need to be able to get a project, especially feature film, across the finish line.
Yeah.
And the biggest piece of advice, that I've applied to myself is just to learn humility and to be humble. And that's going to go further in this career and then in this industry than any kind of skills that you can learn. You know, I long story short, I ran a production company for about 10 years and was the leader of the production company. And there was a point that I looked back and realized that there was no one following me. And I had become a boss instead of a leader. I was enjoying being in the lead and enjoying having that power and winning the awards and all the things that come with success. And when no one is following you, you realize that you've made a big mistake. And so I walked away from the industry and walked away from my company. And I knew that I needed to learn humility in order to even attempt to be in this field or in this space again. And started, working with the Kendricks and really learning humility from them. They're some of the best and most humble people I've ever worked with in the industry. And just seeing how they handle all the pressures and decisions and everything together. I've seen people who are on a potential list for crew and they've done something that lacked humility or didn't stay in their lane, and it's just like it's so easy to not get a job in this industry because of one or two things that you've done that the people making the decision don't want to have or don't want to experience. So I've seen some really talented people that have made some big decisions or things that lacked humility or were too prideful. And when you've got two people on your crew list to consider and this person's got more humility or what have you, it's like, well, let's just go with that person so we can avoid this kind of thing. And you're like, oh, but they're so talented, and you don't want them to but it's really easy. So don't be a professional, be out there doing your best, but don't do your best just for you, because then you're going to be someone who lacks humility and who's prideful, and you're really going to stick out.
That's just great advice for life too.
Certainly.
That just makes you a better person. And yeah, that makes people want to be around you and work with you and everything. So yeah, I appreciate you sharing that with us. That was really good.
And with and I feel like it's such a refreshing thing when somebody actually like is humble enough to care about another person when and it's kind of like surprising, for me as like, a certain level where it's like I'm not so far up the ladder as like a lot of industry people, and when somebody older and more seasoned looks at me and like asks a genuine question and like really cares, and it's like, oh my goodness, this person like actually cares about like what I feel or think or something. It's like you reaching out to come to us. It's like it's refreshing to know that that's possible. Like I can look up to a person who is willing to become equal, like Jesus came down to become equal with all of his people. And we see so many people, get up, at the Oscars per se, maybe, or, we see so many industry people and they've got a lot of arrogance, they've got self-importance, and you're like, wow, those people are so cool. But it's even more impactful. It's not as, you can say that person is cool and they got their life together when they go up and thank themselves for winning an award. But I feel like it's going to touch you as a person, and it's going to touch far more people when you're able to be humble and work as a team. And this is a lesson I need to preach to myself. I'm here talking and I was like, man, you gotta listen to that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And
it's really, really cool.
Kind of like you touched on, like that's people who are people going to remember, the person that goes up and accepts an award, or the person who was humble and was kind in, had a human moment with you,
exactly.
That's so much more memorable, and is going to impact so many more lives.
That's the main thing, is humanity. And actually I was like thinking about this like kind of the other day about like just kind of put away the pretenses for a minute and just like, we're people.
Yeah.
And your audience is people. Here's another topic. you're taking money from your audience because you're selling them a product. Treat them like people.
And they're paying to hear your worldview for 2 hours, you know.
That's true.
It's you've got a lot of power to communicate to them. You know, don't take that that responsibility lightly. You know, what other arena do people, you know, pay and say, tell me what you want to tell me and I'm listening.
Yeah,
that's so true.
Yeah, that's really true.
And I know we're going long, but that made me think of one more thing. You know, being someone who's dreamed of being a movie director, you know, since I was 9 or 10 years old, and you know, finally making it and having films in theaters. Enjoy the journey. You know, don't rush it, because when you grow up and you think about, I want to be a movie director, you don't think about, well, what is it like after I've directed a movie? You know, you imagine, you know, like the title of this podcast, you imagine getting to go to the Oscars and being a Steven Spielberg or being these people. But for most of us, you're not famous. You don't have paparazzi chasing you around. You're not in such demand that you're working on 6 films at the same time. You direct a movie and then you go back to normal life and you pay the bills. You wake up in the morning. Life is just, you're like, okay, I did it. Do I want to do it again? What am I doing now? And that journey can just go so quickly that this thing you've been waiting for 10, 20 years, it's like it's over, you know, because you're like, I can't wait to see this movie done. I can't wait to see what the audience thinks about it. And then you're just waiting for that moment, and it is so brief. But that year of putting that project together is really, you know, the first time the movie was done and it was like, you know what, I don't remember that like I thought I would. I missed out on what it meant to be, you know, a movie director. And that's, you know, the joy of giving people jobs, the joy of hiring people. That's one of the best things about this position, is being able to bless people with employment and doing something that they love to do. And if I could speak to my younger self, I would say slow down and enjoy the journey, enjoy the casting process, enjoy all those meetings, enjoy walking up to people and just hearing them tell you their ideas, and just know that like I'm hanging out with filmmakers and like we're making a movie, and just enjoy that process, because it's going to be over so much quicker than you realize. You know, I wish that I would have journaled more throughout the process, whether that's writing or video. I tried my best to, you know, for 2 minutes on my way into the office, okay, what did I do yesterday? How did it make me feel? What do I need to get better at? And then move on and be able to go back and look at that. And okay, you know, because you get done with a movie and, oh, there's so much I wish I would have done differently. There's so much I wish I would have done better. But to be able to have those specifics of, you know what, I didn't encourage anybody on these 3 or 4 days. I need to encourage people more. I was so worried about my ideas that I didn't hear their ideas. And I really feel like that idea might have been better had I paid attention to those things more. You know, at the end of the day, everybody's there to live their dreams too. And just enjoy that process. Don't wait for the end and rush for the end, because it's going to be over and you're going to wake up and be a normal person. And, you know, it can stink. It can be depressing, you know, when you're like, I've got to wait a year or 2 for that to happen again. So just enjoy that journey that you're on.
That's such good advice. And it goes into the whole identity thing too, where it's like, if you've built up over years, you know, from the time you're a kid until the time you are directing your first feature, if that's your goal and like that's who you are and like that's it, then when it's done, it's like, okay, now what? You know, just like you said. And so yeah, that's so good. And it's so important to, I don't know, have a well-rounded life, I guess. Like not put too much importance in stuff that doesn't matter as much. So it's really good.
And I love how you as we're kind of like, you know, wrapping up it in a classic Midwest way where we stand by the doorway and talk for a little longer. But and you're talking about the journey and that kind of like callback. So we've got setup and payoff here. This is enjoying the journey to success. And as we've talked about before, like success means different things to different people. And I love that you brought that up of the journey, and really like kind of doing what you love is kind of success. It's like fulfilling your dream. Being able to make a movie, period, is like, you made a movie.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And whether you get to make bigger movies and bigger after that is, I mean, kind of up to the Lord, but I don't know. Yeah. I like how you said you just hanging out with filmmakers.
I thought you were gonna say family at first, like
family,
filmmaker
also,
family.
Sometimes it's like family.
Yes.
Yeah.
The best success though is when you change a life, you know, because we're here to change people. We're not just here to entertain. And you know, when someone sends you an email and they say, you know, because of your film, I now have changed my views on life, and we now have a son, and here's our picture. Wow. Knowing that like a human is in existence because of a film that you made, it's like, okay, that beats any other kind of success that you could ever shoot for. And we've had multiple emails like that where, you know, people trusted the Lord and, you know, have children now because of the pro-life work that we're telling through these stories. And it's just like, that's, as a kid, you don't think about that like my films can change someone's life, and someone new can be in existence. It's mind-boggling, and it's so fulfilling.
Well, that I think is a good place to end it.
I think so.
I don't know how we could top that. So before we sign off, Kevin, I did want to, I know you've talked you know, about some of the projects that you have that are coming out. Do you have anything else that you want to, I guess, promote to the audience? Just any website where people can see your work, or if you want to maybe like list out films that you have coming out soon, or anything along those lines. The stage is yours.
When we're going to see this movie.
Yes.
Yeah. Please be sure to check out Lifemark in theaters this fall. We don't have an exact release date yet. But if you guys keep tabs on the Kendricks, you'll be able to see and find out about that film. If anybody listening has up-and-coming filmmakers in elementary school, my kids and I have started an online film school called the Elementary Film School, where we teach film to elementary age kids. So
awesome.
My kids and I, as well as a handful of animated characters, teach everything from storytelling to filmmaking, all on an iPhone, so they don't have to work and worry about a computer, but teaching them the basics and the foundations in an age-appropriate and engaging setting. We've got sing-along songs, and we've got handouts and activities. So it's the website for that is elementaryfilm.school.
I love that so much.
I have a follow-up question. Do you have to be in elementary school? Because I kind of want to take this course.
No, you don't. I mean, if you love sing-along songs and you want, you know, we've got...
I have younger siblings, so...
That's a good excuse for you.
Right.
Yeah.
I want to sing alongs.
Yeah. That's awesome.
We've broken filmmaking down to a basic level, and I didn't have a mentor growing up, and I got really good at lighting and camera work, but my story and foundation was terrible, and I never had anybody to come alongside me, and so it's really got an emphasis on that storytelling, and you know, really putting it in bite-sized chunks. It's really fun. You know, we've got animated characters that make jokes and talk to us and hang out with us, and each episode has a handout sheet that, you know, breaks it down on a fun kid level, so they can learn the basics and learn teamwork, and they can learn humility, and they can learn communication and all the things that need to go along to being a successful filmmaker, and not just making good looking videos, but what are the tools you need to work as a team and to take criticism and feedback, and all those things. So if that's of interest to you, go to elementaryfilm.school and check it out. And we'd love to have you as one of our students.
Kevin, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today. This has been just so much invaluable wisdom from you. And I know I've really enjoyed this, and I feel like I've learned a lot. So I'm looking forward to posting this so our audience can hear it too. But thanks again for being here.
I'm glad. It's been a blast.
Yeah, it's been really great having you. I think that about does it for us. I don't really know where I'm going with this, but until
next time.
Oh, that's it.
Oh yeah,
I forgot our outro.
We're doing the whole Thank you for being here, and until next time. See you
We'll see you on set.
We have to say it together. Say,
We'll
see you on set.
You always try to do it different. You always try like,
because it sounds too monotone.